On this episode of Infinity Sports, we're going to be talking about the creation of super teams. Where did it start? Who's responsible? We know who you think is responsible, but I have a special take on that coming right up after the intro. What's going on, everybody? I'm Wayne G. I'm joined by my sidekicks, as usual. We got Dan Sully Sullivan. What's up?
What's good, man? How we living, bro?
Not too shabby. And Nick Paquin joining us again. What's going on?
What's up, guys? Here for more of my famous controversial takes.
Well, we'll see, because I think I have a controversial take on this one, or against the popular opinion. And obviously, if you watch to the end of the show, we certainly appreciate it. Like and subscribe right now before you forget. At the end of the show, we're going to tell you how to get in touch with us on social media. The topic of the day that we really wanted to jump into is super teams. I mean, if you go to any sports group, you're online, you're talking to your friends at a party, it doesn't matter. The term super team is going to come up, and Lee Harvey Oswald is going to be named LeBron James. And I don't know about you guys. I'm going to get your take and say I don't think LeBron James started the super team, but I'll start with Sully because obviously we're both Lakers fans. LeBron helped us get another title last year. Who do you think started super teams, or where do you think it started?
I mean, I'm sure it started much earlier. I personally first think of super teams as the big three in Boston. That was like the first, I think, that started the trend of free agents or, big names wanting to go and join other stars so they can win. I mean, that was the specific goal of Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen, were to go and join Paul Pierce to specifically win a title with those three. I mean, like that was, and I mean, that's everybody's goal, but, they coerced that meetup so they could eventually then win a title, which they obviously did. And to me, that's where it reigns, is that's the beginning of the fall.
And
what about
your take?
I think the Celtics thing is fair. I always looked at the Celtics as the quote-unquote big three, the one that Kobe beat. But I always looked at them as the big three and not really like a super team. I always looked at that. I looked at the Celtics as guys towards the ends of their career who were, to Sully's point, trying to team up to win a title. They weren't a team that was trying to put together a dynasty. Do you know what I'm saying? So, for me, the first super team that I think of off the top of my head is I'm going to take my talent to South Beach, and I'm going to go play with a guy who's already won a title. He's already a top 5 player in the league. Oh, and I'm going to go recruit Chris Bosh, who at that time maybe a top 10 player in the league. Obviously that dropped off in Miami, but that tends to happen.
They were the top 3 free agents. I think that. So for me, it begins in the 1960s with the Boston Celtics, Bill Russell winning those 11 championships. And to put in perspective, we can say, oh, well, LeBron James had Dwayne Wade and, Chris Bosh, or Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and throw Rondo in there, right? I mean, you can say those. I'm saying Bill Russell, the worst team that he played on, and I mean the trashiest garbage team that he played on in Boston, had 5 Hall of Famers at the same time. The best team had 8 Hall of Famers at the same time. So imagine your starting 5 are all going to the Hall of Fame, and 3 guys off the bench are all going to the Hall of Fame. Those are bigger. I mean, that's the only team that's more super team than that is the 92 Dream Team.
Well, the Hall of Fame was smaller then, right? So they were early inductees into the Hall of Fame. So that's one thing to take into consideration. The other is, how were those Celtics teams built, right? Those guys weren't hitting each other up on Twitter or calling each other on the phone and saying, hey, let's start a dynasty in Boston together and team up, right? I mean, I might be wrong, but I don't think that's how it went down in Boston. Wilt played with Hall of Famers too.
He did.
I don't know. My whole the argument I have against you, Nick, is the dynasty. What makes you? LeBron didn't go to Miami to start a dynasty. He was there for 4 years. That's not a dynasty.
But that's what he said.
That's only 3 players too. They didn't go start a super team. So I don't get how that falls on him there. Honestly, I don't think any of these guys are technically creating a super team if we think about it that way, because it's really 3 or 4 big stars and the rest of the team's kind of trash, and it's just guys they can piece together. And, like the Boston run, I mean, Ray Allen played for Boston for 4 or 5 years, and then Kevin Garnett played for, I think, 5 or 6 years, 7 years there. So it's that was more of a technically dynasty run. Granted, they didn't have the win, but they stayed there longer. So that's my argument there with you. I don't think there's really any difference from what LeBron did from what KG, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen did. I don't see any difference.
Well, I think that's like, I think you have to look at it like I look at it, first of all, you have to define super team, right? Like, what is a super team? And for me, a super team is if you have two guys that are top 5 talents in the league playing on the same team, and then then they're literally cherry picking other teammates to come play with them. To me, that's a super team. And that's exactly what Miami did. You talk about Ray Allen in Boston, but Ray Allen also ended up in Miami, didn't he? I mean, Ray Allen won that Miami team a title. I mean, Chalmers was no slouch on that Miami team. Udonis Haslem, no slouch on that Miami team. I'm just saying, like, you know, they had
Rajon Rondo was no slouch. Kendrick Perkins was no slouch at the time. You know what I mean? Like,
but they were drafted by the Celtics, right? Like those guys were already pieces there. Those guys were pieces there. Where I'm looking at, like, they were like, And here's my point. Like, LeBron went there to build a dynasty. If you remember during the decision, he said, you know, after the intro, not 6, not 7, not 8, or whatever he was saying. I mean, they were, you know, little did we know then LeBron's never in it for the long haul. But at that point, we were like, oh, okay, you know, LeBron's going to be there. He's going to try winning it every single year. Thankfully, Dirk, the lone guy in Dallas, was like, and squashed that the first time around. So, but I don't know. I mean, for me, when I think of super team, that's how I define it. You get 2 top 5 talents in the league, and you sort of start cherry picking from other teams of guys who can fit the salary cap structure, guys you want to play with, all that kind of thing. I mean, that's building a super team.
So then to that effect, even before the Celtics, we have the Los Angeles Lakers. Kobe and Shaq were number 1 and number 2 in the league in terms of how good they were. And then they had Karl Malone and Gary Payton, who I know were at the very end of their career. Right. Particularly Malone, who retired after that season, but Peyton went on to win a championship with the Heat and Dwayne Wade, that first championship. So you get Gary Payton, Karl Malone, first ballot Hall of Famers, Kobe and Shaq, top 2 players in the league at the time. And was that a super team?
I mean, I think it's different again with the Lakers because they drafted Kobe, right? Or they traded for the draft rights of Kobe.
They traded for Kobe, and then they signed Malone, and they traded for Peyton.
But they really built Kobe up, right? Like, Kobe didn't start for the Lakers his first 2 years.
He was starting that year, though. He was starting in 2004, though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not taking it away, but I don't look at the Lakers as like a super team. I think that was the best duo, right? Like, I think that was the best duo at the time. I didn't think that they were a super team. They had some good pieces already in place in Los Angeles, right? Like, I mean, they're the Lakers. The Lakers are always going to have some decent talent there. I just, you know, Shaq knew he wasn't going to be able to get it done by himself. We had seen that against Olajuwon in the finals. The Lakers knew that. So they went out and they were like, you know, we're high on this kid, Kobe Bryant. We're going to give up Vlade Divac for him. We already got Shaq. We'll see if we can build this kid up and make him like, you know, a Robin to Shaq's Batman. I think the roles kind of flipped in reverse, but that's a different topic. I don't know. I don't look at the Lakers, those Lakers teams as a super team.
I don't know. I think it defines every criteria you stated because, I mean, they did handpick pieces and things like that. Yes,
top 5 players.
Yeah, I mean, of course they had 2 top 5 players. You know, of course they had some pieces in place, but every team does. Like Miami didn't ditch everyone they had on their roster. You know, I think what you harped on why LeBron gets the biggest criticism for all of this is because he's done it multiple times now. The guy jumps multiple teams, brings in who he wants, wins a couple titles or maybe doesn't, you know what I mean? And then jumps. And I think that's why he's getting this stigma. I also think because obviously the KD right after that, and that just blew everything out of the water because KD going to a team with Steph, with Clay, can you close that? Yeah. With Steph, with Clay, you know, with Draymond Green, you know, with all these guys, that's a super team if you ask me. You know what I mean?
It was a 73-9 team the year before.
Yeah, exactly. It was the greatest team of all time. And then they add Kevin Durant, who's easily a top 3 player in the league. So, I mean, truly, that's the closest thing we've seen to a super team, I think, in a long time.
Well, then they added Boogie Cousins.
Yeah, and then they had, like, I mean, that was ridiculous and still is ridiculous to this day, if you ask me. I mean, I think that's Kevin Durant's biggest knock have some nuts at least and win the title, you know, where you're at. Don't try and join. But at the same time, I'm all for winning the title. I'd do it. I'd go play with Steph Curry. Like, fuck.
See, I don't know. I mean, to me, that's what – to me, too, like, now you're getting into I know this is about super teams, but I think, like, first of all, I think, like, the whole, like, super team trend now, and you see, like, Harden in Brooklyn, right? Like, forcing his way over to Brooklyn and those kind of things. I think that the whole super team trend, you've seen the impact that it's had on the league as a whole. And now you start to see a little bit of a reversal, and the league's much more fun, right? Like you've got a guy like Giannis staying in Milwaukee. And if Giannis wants to stay in Milwaukee, for example, and I'm just using this as an example, Giannis wants to be in Milwaukee with Middleton and some of the other guys that they have there, like Portis or, DeVincio and all these guys. If Giannis wants to work to get another free agent, like maybe like a top 10 player to come to Milwaukee and that player does it, I don't look at that as a knock to Giannis. If somebody like another top 5 guy leaves their current situation and goes to jump to play with Giannis, then I think it's a knock to them. So I'm not necessarily knocking the super teams. It's all about like who's initiating these super teams, because I don't look at it with Golden State. I mean, KD was ring hopping. He was looking for a ring, and he knew his best bet was obviously with the Warriors, who built that team. Like, they built that team around Clay, Steph, Draymond. They were a good team, even Iguodala to some extent, right?
They were a great team. They won 73 games.
Right. That's what I mean. Great team. Yeah. Historic team.
Yeah.
And I think that the difference in this conversation always comes up when it gets this far into the conversation is not so much the definition of a super team, because we can debate that, were the Lakers a super team? Were the original Celtics a super team? But the definition, not so much, is how it came together, right? And that always comes up. Like LeBron James went and recruited these guys. And my take is always this. What's the difference between Pat Riley saying, hey, LeBron, should we get Dwayne Wade? And him saying yes, to LeBron saying, hey, Dwayne Wade, do you want to come here? What's the difference?
I don't see one. I mean, I agree. I never had an issue with players reaching out to other players. I like it. I think it's good. I know it's like tampering issues and things like that. But, I mean, I personally don't care. And to Nick's point, too, I mean, we made an argument, or I made the argument, nobody in this entire league, even LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, none of them could do it without help. You need help, plain and simple. So I don't knock any of these players for going and trying to put themselves in the best situation possible. I understand why they may get a little hate for it, or people may give them try to win it on your own. Well, the reality is most of the time you can't. It's usually pretty impossible to. So, I mean, I don't think it's a knock on either. Like, I don't knock Kevin Durant personally. I know that's why some people knock him. But personally, I don't care. Go win your ring, bro. That just makes your stance for the Hall of Fame better, in my opinion. So
yeah, and I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, obviously the rings argument in basketball is a huge talking point. It's not like baseball. It's a huge conversation. I mean, in my opinion, you need at least 3 rings to be in the conversation of greatest of all time for a basketball player. I mean, I would say at least 3 rings. Yeah. But I think now you get into like legacy, right? Like there's certain guys who enter the league. Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan are the only 2 that I can think of off the top of my head who enter the league, and they don't want the help. They want to put a team on their back, and they would rather lose doing it that way than win doing it the other way. And the fact that they
Pau Gasol think differently, bro.
I mean, but Pau Gasol didn't average 20 points a game at any point in the postseason. So I
would disagree with that. I got to look.
Well, Kobe Bryant's the only player in NBA history to win multiple titles with somebody not averaging 20 points in the postseason with him.
Well, that's a cherry pick stat, though.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's a cherry pick stat, but it just goes to show you the actual supporting cast around Kobe, who beat that that Celtics team, by the way. And I mean, my whole thing with Shaq too is like you have like the whole Shaquille O'Neal carrying Kobe situation and that kind of stuff.
I don't say that. Hey, sorry guys, I apologize.
No worries. But I mean, that's just my thing too. Like, it's like how much of a legacy do you want? That's why when I hear people say like the whole like GOAT situation or the GOAT conversation with LeBron, it drives me nuts, because it's like, I mean, Kobe had plenty of opportunities in his career to go cherry pick and play with guys like Tim Duncan, Tracy McGrady, and all these people, but he decided not to. He toughed it out. He toughed it out where he was at, and he went through some hard times, and he won championships in those hard times.
And he asked not to be in Los Angeles during those times.
What do you mean?
He asked to be traded. Kobe Bryant asked to be traded. He didn't want to be there.
Yeah. That was a ploy for them to make a decision between him and Shaq. I mean, I don't blame him for that. He wanted to cement his own legacy, and he was probably sick of being that Robin thing, right? And he wasn't going to leave Los Angeles. Donald Sterling was willing to give him the Staples Center.
But so you don't find it ironic that when he has a dominant big man, and trust me, I love Kobe. Like, I mean, Wayne will tell you he's my favorite athlete. Basketball player. Kobe was winning titles, and the Lakers were great with a dominant big man. Shaq gets traded. Then the Lakers trade for Pau Gasol, and they win 2 more titles, and he's great with a dominant big man. Again, I love Kobe. I think he's amazing. He's the second greatest player, in my opinion, like watching him pure talent wise. At the same time, everybody needs help. Nobody can do it themselves. I know the Bills are the Bulls kind of drafted their team, but they're a super team too, if you really want to think about it.
Well, that's what I mean. We'd have to define super team, but I look at the whole situation with Kobe and MJ. It's that's why to me they're in that whole GOAT conversation, right? Because frame it however you want. Pau Gasol's not Shaq, right?
He was still 19 and 12 for the season and a three-time All
an argument for top 3 or top 4 power forward in the NBA at the time.
What does that mean? So he's behind guys like Tim Duncan and KG. He was definitely behind guys like Dirk Nowitzki. So it's but that's huge. That's Kobe's competition. But
when you're 18, when you're getting 18 and 12, and he was a 4-time All NBA player, 1 time with Memphis, 3 years with the Lakers. So during his stint with the Lakers, he was prime Pau Gasol, which was lethal. You remember, I know the argument. Nobody's ever going to sit here and say Pau Gasol's Shaq. Nobody's ever going to say that. All right, you can't sit here and tell me that Pau Gasol wasn't, an elite player in his prime. The guy was dead.
He was probably the equivalent of Chris Bosh, or I would say he's not as good as Dwayne Wade or Kyrie Irving in the play, especially in the postseason. I would say he's not Kevin Durant in the postseason, right? He's not an Anthony Davis in the postseason. So I look at it I look at it that way, right? And that's why the whole super team and the team building. That's why I'm glad it looks like the league is getting away from it. Guys like Donovan Mitchell wanted to stay in Utah. Giannis wanted to stay in Milwaukee. Luka said he wants to be like Dirk. I love that.
Yeah, they want to until the team doesn't build a super team around them.
Yeah.
Which is
I don't think they have to build a super team though. Why do you have to build a super team to win a title? Because you guys say that the Lakers, quote unquote, tried building that super team with Malone and Peyton and all that, and they lost to a Pistons team who was definitely not a super team.
Right, that's an outlier. The Lakers swept the playoffs up until the finals. They looked like the team that was going to sweep the Pistons too. It just so happened that the Pistons defense was lights out. Ben Wallace shut down Shaquille O'Neal, which I didn't think anybody could do. So a lot of factors played into that, but that's an outlier situation. The reason you need to build a super team is because in order to win, you have to beat a super team. And you can't beat a super team without one. Like I said, the Pistons you can't name another team other than the Pistons that have done it.
Dallas Mavericks.
That's true. Dallas. I will give him that. And I was just about to say that. Dirk and Dallas. But, that was arguably the greatest choke job of all time. Let's be real. And just to get back on the Pau Gasol point, he was 17 and 10 through the playoffs in their one championship and 16 and 10 in the other championship. So, those are great numbers. I'm telling you,
they're solid. They're solid numbers. And
it's not Shaq, but when you have that and then Kobe's putting up 25 a game, you're going to win a lot of freaking games, man.
Maybe. Montrezl Harrell is probably going to average those Pau Gasol numbers this postseason, right? So it's
people are scoring 130 a game now.
Right. No, I get it, but I'm just saying, the whole. So that's where the gray area for me is with the whole super team thing. And my whole thing with the super team era is I just hope it'll die when this wave of superstars is gone. So the LeBrons and the KDs and the Hardens. I don't see these younger guys grouping up and teaming up together. I just don't see it. Ja Morant doesn't strike me as that type of person. Colin Sexton doesn't strike me as that type of player. Luka, he says he's not. Giannis had always said he wasn't that type of guy. They're proving it. I don't think Tatum – the Celtics are a different beast altogether. I don't think Tatum's one of those guys that I'm mentioning here, but you get what I'm saying, though.
See, but a lot of times it's not up to their control. So Luka could obviously stay in Dallas and then – holler at, I don't know, Zion and be like, yo, why would you, what are you going to win in New Orleans? Come, I don't, we're hypothetically, come play in Dallas with the greatest owner in sports. You know what I mean? And let's create a dynasty here. Granted, Zion doesn't strike me like that guy either, I guess, but right. At some point you have to get another star. And if your team refuses to go out and get one or sign one or draft, sometimes you can't draft one and hit one. I don't know. I agree with Wayne. You have to beat a super team. You have to. You're gonna have to.
But I think that's where we're. So I don't think having multiple all-stars on one team is a super team. I think having multiple superstars on one team is a super team. Right? That's the difference for me. LeBron's a guy who goes to a team where he's not the only top 5 player in the league or top 5 talent in the league, and that's how he wins championships. If LeBron's on a team with guys like Montrezl Harrell and we'll even say Zion instead of AD, right? Like, that's different. If he's going to win in with those guys, fine. Because to both of your points, you have to have talent and other players around you. I'm not going to take that away. Like, Pau Gasol was an all-star, but Pau Gasol wasn't a superstar, right? Like, that's the difference.
So you're defining top 5 versus top 10 versus top 20 or something. So you don't care about having 3 top 20s, just not 2 top 5s.
Oh, I would say like 2 top 10s even.
Okay.
Yeah. I would say 2 top 10s. I think if you have like 2 top 30s, okay, maybe you get a pass, right? From me. I don't know. If you have a guy like Luka and a guy like Jason Tatum, for me, you're probably on the cusp, right? If you have those 2 guys on the same team. Because Tatum to me might be a top 10, but I might be convinced he's not.
Okay.
And I think the thing that gets lost in the shuffle with the Lakers, with the Chicago Bulls, is that Phil Jackson is one of those pieces. Like, the Chicago Bulls had Pippen, Jordan, and Rodman, and Phil Jackson. They had a big 4, because Phil Jackson has that big of an impact. And I think that truth in that is you look at the Bulls winning 6 with Phil Jackson, 0 without him. He goes to the Lakers, they win 3 in a row, then they go to 3 more in a row. It's cool because he left. Del Harris came in, I think, and then Rudy Tomjanovich lasted like 8 games. But when Phil Jackson came back, they three-peated as Western Conference champs again. So Phil Jackson's part of that conversation as well. I know you say 2 top 10s or 2 top. You have to include Phil Jackson as one of those guys.
Yeah, but that's so like it's such. Like, I think that coaching now in the NBA is an outlier, right? Like, you don't even need a coach to win a title.
I actually would probably agree with that. I mean, if you got a guy like LeBron on your team, you don't need a coach. I feel like especially if it's a veteran-run team like New Orleans, just to bring another example, they're a pretty young team. I think they need a strong coach or somebody like that. But a team like the Lakers with LeBron and AD and all these vets, and I mean, obviously they probably don't need a coach, but I don't know. I think coaches are important, especially in basketball. I actually think, assistant coaches do more work, honestly, because I think they're the ones developing and scheming, set offenses and plays and then relaying it to the coach. And then coaches gives his information, obviously, with what he has. But I don't know. I think that's another topic. But I don't think there's a difference maker in today's game, like you're mentioning, Wayne.
No, same.
Not like Phil Jackson. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, or just not even a difference maker who's going to go to a coach. I mean, Popovich is probably the best active coach. Spurs are trash, right? Like, look at the reality of the situation. I mean, who's been the best team record-wise? We'll just go by record. Who's been the best team in the Eastern Conference over the last 3 years? The Milwaukee Bucks. Who's their head coach right now? Pop quiz off the top of your head.
Steve Buchenheiser-Neister.
It's exactly. First of all, his name's Mike. Yeah, exactly. But yeah. But that's my point. Like, no one knows that. You know what I'm saying? And like, for them to be like basically the top team in the East over the last 3 years, and no one knows who their head coach is. I mean, that goes. And Giannis is clearly a top 3 player in the league.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So yes, maybe it depends on the makeup of the team, because I would say that, a top 3 team in the East the last 3 years have been the Boston Celtics. I think you take Brad Stevens off that team and they might not even make the playoffs.
Oh, I don't know. I think my cousin's a huge Celtics fan, and I'll tell you what, he would be flipping out hearing you with that take, because a lot of Celtics fans think Brad Stevens is the reason the team's not his cousin. I'm just saying, like, this is a kid who's watched like every Celtics game for like almost a decade. So like a lot of Celtics fans seem to believe that the reason the team's talent isn't up to where it should be is because, 1, their superstars don't take over the role of coach, and 2, Brad Stevens has too much pull. So Brad Stevens, in essence, is the issue in Boston.
Yeah, I would completely disagree with that.
Yeah, I think so. I like Brad Stevens as a coach, but I mean, there is something to stay with, like, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, like, both floating at the cusp of greatness and not actually achieving that yet. And I don't know if I would blame Brad Stevens for that at this point, but I at the same time, I've been at a point where I've been frustrated as a fan as to why nothing's working. It's like, especially as a Manchester United fan, and it's, why isn't this working? Get the coach out and get a new one in, and then most of the time it doesn't work anyway. But that's soccer, so Yeah, but but with basketball, I don't know. I don't know if you could specifically blame it on the coach. I think a lot has to do with the makeup of the player. Like, I don't see a killer when I look at Jason Tatum. I don't see a guy like Kobe who just literally wants to step on somebody's neck. I don't see that when I look at Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown, to be honest with you. I think they're both tremendous talents, and I think they're both great secondary pieces, but I don't think I'd build a team around either one.
See, I think, and me and Nick had this conversation on our top 10 duos under the age of 25. I think Jaylen Brown is a superstar. I would trade Tatum over Jaylen Brown if I had to.
I like Jaylen Brown more. I think he plays more tenaciously on defense, so I like Jaylen Brown a little more.
And he stepped up this year. He's averaging 27.5 this year.
Is he really?
Yeah.
He was in the MVP. Yeah, he was in the MVP conversation early.
Jaylen Brown's always been my dude. I'm a big fan of his, so that's great to hear. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I mean, but back to this whole super team thing. Like, Boston would have to blow it up, right? Like, they'd have to trade like a Tatum for a guy like, Luka or something like that to come play with Brown, or vice versa. You trade like Brown for a guy like Luka. I mean, I was not saying Dallas would ever do that, but like, that's what it would take for me to be like, looks a lot like team building.
I mean, I get that. I think the clarity that you gave with saying, okay, if there's two top 10s on a team and they weren't drafted or something like that, then it's, which I don't even know how that would happen. That'd be pretty sick. I mean, Boston could do that, I guess, with Tatum and Brown. But then that was kind of your definition of a super team, which I don't necessarily disagree with. I think it'd be hard pressed. I mean, I think for me personally, it's if you got three guys that are all within like the top 10 or 15 at that point. I don't think two is a precursor for me, but three. So like right now, what's going on in Brooklyn, I think is close to a super team.
Absolutely
yeah,
a super.
And that one, again, I don't care, but by all means, that's like I'm going to look at that as a super team. And then honestly, that's kind of the only one. I know the Lakers look like a super team because it's two top three players. You know what I mean? So I get it. Again, that for me, it's a little more difficult because I think for me, a big precursor is the third guy. And who's your third best player? And when your third best player is Montrezl Harrell or
Schroeder.
Or Dennis Schroeder, who's none of these guys we're naming are top 30 guys in the league, so that's where it gets a little tough for me to call it a super team and not just two superstars playing together. You know what I mean? So I think that's where it gets a little wishy-washy for me with the two guys.
Yeah. It's probably, I mean, it's fair. So I guess we agree on that.
Yeah.
We agree on this one. There's no definitive super team.
For a super team.
Yeah.
And the other big take here is, I mean, the three of us, I don't really think give a damn. And
right.
And I think the people that do, I don't really get it. Like, honestly, most of the people that do, I assume, are Miami fans who are salty, Bron left, or Cleveland fans who are salty, who left and went to Miami, or, all that shit. Honestly, to me, that's where it's mostly, I think, hate-driven, because otherwise, I think it's great. I love seeing these guys play together.
That's where I'm like a little bit. I'm not aligned with you on that one, Sully, because like I can't stand the whole like guys teaming up. Like I want to see. I think it's better for the league to have all of these different like top 10 players in different markets, especially if those markets are smaller, like a Milwaukee, or like if Ja blows up and is that top 10 guy that I think he can be in Memphis. You know what I mean? Like I think that's better for the league. Luka in Dallas, and then you build around those pieces, right?
See, but I think that the NBA pool is so talent rich right now that they don't even have to worry about that. Like you said, you have all these guys already in place in these smaller markets, Zion in New Orleans and Donovan Mitchell in Denver and Utah's winning a ton of games and Donovan Mitchell in Utah and Jamal Murray and Jokic in Denver and you have a ton. I mean, the talent pool is so rich right now that I truthfully don't think they have that issue. And when these stars do move, I think it creates such a hubbub for the league that it's great. Honestly, I don't think it's hurting. Like, I mean, the West is so deep. You know, it's so deep, and the East is, it is what it is, but it's getting better, obviously, now with Brooklyn and Milwaukee and Boston and, these teams. So I don't know. I love where the league is trending personally. I also think it's got a lot to do with these crazy talented kids coming in and being so ready for the league.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, that's our take on super teams. What is your take on super teams? Why do you hate LeBron? Just send us a message on social media. We are available at Infinity Sports Podcast on Facebook, at Infinity Sports Podcast on Instagram, and at Sports Infinity 5 on Twitter. If you'd like to listen to the show, these episodes are available on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music. And on the YouTube video here, like I said, like, subscribe, and comment below whether you agree with us. If you don't like us. If you want to dislike the video, that's fine. Tell us why. We'd be more than happy to reach out to you and tell you why you're wrong.
And argue why you're wrong. Yeah, exactly. Good call, in.
All right, so that's pretty much it. Kenny, where are we at the show-wise?
Okay.